Mom, I'm bored. Why don't you go play outside? It's too hot outside, and I think I already got my quota of hose water for the week. Maybe you could read a book about astrology and learn to make astrology charts for your characters using our DOS software and our dot matrix printer. Actually, yeah, that totally sounds like that could become my fixation for the next 2 months. My childhood was definitely unusual. I was unschooled, aka hippie homeschooled, with pretty minimal structure, but in a lot of ways typical of many older millennials and Gen X kids. I had a lot of long, boring days to fill, and it's hard to bring this up without acknowledging that there have been these generational changes. I grew up in a pretty rural neighborhood, so we didn't really have like any other kids to play with either, whereas my partner lived in more of a suburban neighborhood where he had other kids to play with. So it was pretty much just me and my middle sister. Disheveled editing Lydia here. I mean, obviously at the time she was my little sister, not my middle sister. But then when I was 15, my parents had another kid, so then she became my middle sister. And it wasn't unusual for us to only leave the house like twice a week or so. We would have like an errand day and maybe one other thing. Maybe like a family outing on the weekend or something. And of course back then, even if you went to school, it wasn't as common for kids to have so many extracurricular activities going on. We did take some like art classes and acting classes and like, summer classes, but it just didn't seem like it was as much of a regular thing as it is nowadays. And it was possible to just literally have nothing fresh to do at all. You had read all your books, you'd played all your video games, you'd played all your board games, you'd listened to all your music, you'd watched every movie that you owned 10 times. So your only source of any kind of freshness in life was the television, but we only had, maybe like 6 broadcast channels or something. So a lot of times you'd turn on the TV and there was nothing of interest at all, and what there was like reruns of syndicated sitcoms or like some kind of terrible movie or trashy talk shows. You would wait for the moments when they would show new cartoons on Saturday mornings and in the afternoon, or maybe you'd watch the PBS morning block, although you kind of grow out of a lot of that. So like there was nothing to stimulate yourself with. You had to come up with something on your own. And this video is not like a commentary on childhood specifically. This is just to establish like the memories of what life used to be like if you didn't have cable, pre-internet, and you didn't even live on a bustling street with a lot of other kids to play with. There was just nothing to do. And nowadays that's just not the case. There is always fresh content that I could consume at any moment, and that is true for everyone of every age, unless of course you're a kid whose parents have restricted them from accessing content. But it's pretty rare nowadays for parents to block children from like all media. Chances are though you have. It figures I'm trying to make this video and I've been setting it up and like getting ready for it for hours, and now there's a tow truck across the street just as I'm trying to actually make it, so sorry for the tow truck noise. But nowadays I could look at the internet forever. There's always like the endless feed, the streaming services I'm subscribed to. I mean, heck, even just having a Roku and not paying for any streaming services, I have access to, like 6 at least different apps that have free content and like a bunch of channels. Like it's already way more than the TV I had as a kid, even if I don't pay for a single streaming service. There's just no end of stuff to watch and stuff to read, and streaming music on Spotify. You're just never out of stuff. So I'm never bored anymore, but instead I have this new emotion which is like this apathy. Like there's a million things to do and I don't want any of them. But it is different than the boredom of my childhood when there truly were no choices. There was nothing to stimulate yourself with. And the only choice was to find something to do. Nowadays, you can succumb to the apathy and just sit there on your phone or just binge a show or something. And you can just do that endlessly. And I feel like this has kind of harmed my creative spark, and I wanted to talk about it. One of the things that could break me out of boredom as a kid was just learning something new, some new skill I could put to use. And that's why I'm so happy to partner with Brilliant to sponsor this video. Like, I remember this time as a kid, I had a math lesson and I learned about statistics and averages, and then I spent like the next week making up all these goofy statistics and averages about the characters in my fantasy world and like the RPG games I was working on and stuff. Like, how many characters used elemental magic versus not. And there was no reason to do this. It was just for fun. And as an adult, you might feel like you need more of a reason to learn, or maybe you just want to learn for fun. But either way, Brilliant is a great way to level up those skills, helping you become a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of visual interactive lessons in math, data analysis, AI, science, and computer programming. Like, I would love to learn how to make little computer programs instead of just sitting there mindlessly consuming content. And the great thing about Brilliant is you can load it onto your phone, your tablet, your computer, and then you can tell it how much time you want to devote to it every day. So it's a great way to learn something instead of just mindlessly scrolling and pick up some new skills. Brilliant works by letting you play with concepts and solve problems and then level up. Very satisfying. To learn for free on Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/thecozycreative. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. Brilliant's also given our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant. Just realized that my light got turned off accidentally. So let's improve this situation. I'm having this kind of day where everything is like technical difficulties and tow trucks and so I miss when I would just get like truly and utterly bored and the only thing that I could do was to learn a new thing or to create something. And you know, it's not like I really want to turn back time and go to an era where I couldn't watch old David Bowie videos on YouTube at any given moment.
All you have to do is, from a distract his mind, hit him here in his groin, and that way.
And my only choices were reruns of, you know, MASH and Gilligan's Island. But there is a part of me that yearns for that era where we did not have endless feeds and endless content, and when true painful boredom was actually possible. And obviously this video cannot tell you how to turn back time. I've talked a lot on this channel about like how to break social media habits and how to like focus more on writing and, you know, the good stuff that we all would love to focus more on, our creative projects, or even just spending time with family and friends, or like anything other than just wasting our lives on social media. But it is a struggle. It's not like I've perfected it. I've gotten better. I did actually quit Facebook and pretty much all social media after my video titled "This Might Be What Finally Gets Me to Quit Social Media." I did mostly quit social media after that video. But you know what I started doing instead? Endlessly scrolling Reddit, and I'm not even signed in, so I can't spend time talking to anybody on there, but I just like look at it, and then I'll just look at people's cats on Reddit and, you know, doom scrolling. It's like a weird mix of doom scrolling and cats when you're not signed in. That's not good. I'm trying to figure out how to not look at that anymore either, but that's kind of how it is. Like you figure out how to eliminate one thing and then you creep back into something else. And ugh. So I thought maybe I'll make a video in praise of boredom and see if that gets me myself to appreciate boredom a little more. So I remember this cycle from childhood that I would have a project. You know, I'm making a comic, I'm trying to write a novel, I'm doing something. Maybe my sister and I are just playing some elaborate, like, pretend game arc. And it's finished, and I don't know what to do. I'm stuck in the story, I'm burned out on the comic. We don't know what to do together or apart. And I feel like, you know, thinking about it historically, probably for a lot of kids in the 20th century especially, like, there was starting to be more of, like, middle class children who were not expected to like work on the farm throughout the course of the 20th century. So kids got to be kids more than they had in history and didn't have to like labor as much. And by the time we were kids in the 80s and early to mid 90s. Entertainment options were still relatively few. Of course, the TV didn't exist as much in some earlier generations, but all we had was television or radio and our imaginations. And we might have been expected to do like some chores, but it wasn't like, we had to bring the cows in and get the eggs and weed the gardens and plow the fields. And I didn't have a lot of work to do. So there was a lot of idle time. And I think there really is something to be said for idle time as far as like innovation goes, because when you're bored and you don't have any stimulation, you have to think of something to stimulate yourself. So I would reach this point after I would be stuck in my projects or just kind of like, nothing was grabbing me. This boredom would descend on me that was like, it was agony. I can still remember how agonizing this boredom would feel. It wasn't a pleasant emotion at all. It was terrible. It was like this desperation for just to get out or for something to happen. Some kind of like what I would now realize was like a dopamine hit, that I was desperate to have that hit of like some kind of really exciting thing. And I would want to like go to the mall or something, even though I didn't have any money. I think there's a notebook where I just wrote a story that was just like about wanting to go to the mall so badly because it seemed like things were happening there back in the day. But we were not going to the mall. We rarely went to the mall. We were not going much of anywhere. Nothing was happening. And I would be laying around just so bored. And then suddenly I would feel the brain to start to like look outward. It was like this breaking point that I would hit where I would start to feel the interest in making something happen activate, like a light bulb coming on. It's the light bulb of ideas. Mom, I want Final Fantasy 2. You'll just have to save money for it. But that'll take all year. Seems like good training for your future as a starving artist. Actually, yeah, you're right. I could just make my own board game version of it and add in my own original fanfic characters to go with it. Okay, actually, no, don't bother me. I'm making my own fully plotted out sequel with gridded dungeons as one does. And I would suddenly become interested in discovering something new or creating something new. So I do distinctly remember this point when I was laying around bored and my mom was like, maybe you should read about astrology. And that was only just one of many moments. It just happens to be the one that I remember very distinctly, probably because I got really interested in astrology for a few months. It was fun. Like there were these charts to create. There were like, and I would have to hand draw. Like back then, we had this software where you could put in somebody's birthday and it would generate like an astrology chart, and then you had to like hand draw all the like planetary aspects or like these geometric angles, and then there would be this like endless analysis of astrology charts. Astrology is one of those things you can interpret endlessly, and it's kind of like getting into like personality types or any of those things where you can just kind of, or tarot readings, where you can just kind of endlessly like think like, what could this mean? So it was a real rabbit hole to dig into at the time. And I made charts for all my characters, and I was like comparing like whether they were compatible. And I spent months on this. And we would go to the library once a week. So that was where I could kind of try to find like new material for whatever my interest of the month or the year was. And as terrible as that feeling of boredom was, and I don't necessarily wish to have that feeling back, but the good side of the boredom was so good. There would be this sense of like wonder and excitement when the boredom would finally flip into some new interest or some new creative project. And I would feel like, wow, isn't this amazing that I can just continue to create things and learn new things forever? And all the ideas that I absorbed over the course of these years and these periods of like boredom and renewal could be put together in new ways. And a lot of my most ambitious and exciting childhood projects were dredged from the well of boredom. Like, I spent a lot of time making these elaborate Final Fantasy board games with like different gaming systems and like trying out different things. Like, should we have cards? Should we just use dice? Different systems. And like, you know, looking back, it's like, well, I didn't become a game designer or anything, but it just stretches your brain in all these different ways so that you can figure out like what you like and what you're good at, and you can apply these things to different areas of your life that you might not even have expected. Nowadays, I never feel bored. I just feel like apathy. It's different than boredom because there's always the awareness that I have a million things I could be doing. In fact, I have a bunch of things that I bought with the thought that I would enjoy doing them, and instead it just feels like too many things. And that's partly why I'm trying to just pare down the things I own. Like, I actually am realizing I want to be less stimulated and I want to have less options, not more. And I get why I accumulated a lot of things and why I thought that would be a good idea, because my little child brain was remembering how terrible the boredom was and how much I wanted like a new book to read or a new game to play, and I just didn't have it. So my adult brain was like, the more things I have to do, the more stories I have and the more games I have, the more exciting life will be. But that's not actually true. In hindsight, it was better to have a limited number of things and get really deep into the things I loved the most, because I had to prioritize what I was spending my money on. I couldn't have every game. I had to have my favorite games, and then I had to replay them because there were no other games. So I played the Final Fantasy games, you know, a dozen times, and I got really deep into like learning them, thinking about the characters, writing fanfic, making my own games based on them. Even just like finding new ways to like play that game. And I got really into the ElfQuest comics because like I couldn't buy all the comics, so I focused on my favorite comic. But you know, that got me into this like deep thought about the things I really loved, and then thinking how I could apply them to my own art, or doing fan art or fan projects based on those things. Like, I miss that limited number of things in my life, just when I had to prioritize what I really loved, and I could not waste time on stupid stuff very much because there wasn't anything worth bothering with. Like, I had to be pretty sick to actually sit through a whole afternoon of syndicated sitcoms, or, you know, it's not like nowadays where I could always find something that like would be pretty good to watch on TV. Sometimes I wonder if this sense of apathy also comes from just everything being so accessible at all times. Like, I don't want to give up like YouTube. I love, for example, that if I just want to like stroll the streets of a quaint German village, I can turn on YouTube and I can like live vicariously through someone's video. And sometimes it feels like I can smell that street because it feels so just like on the ground, like I am there. And I love that level of accessibility of like being able to do a deep dive on something on YouTube, or I can watch a bunch of videos where other nerds spend hours talking about some niche topic. I really love all of that, but I do wonder if the endless feeds have stolen a certain sense of wonder from my life, that wonder of like discovering something that really suited me and was really exciting for me. I wonder if it takes a little bit of excitement out of all of life to have access to everything all the time. But what I do know for sure is that I'm just not getting the benefits of boredom anymore. First it was a tow truck, now there's a delivery truck coming up my driveway. I hate this feeling I've had lately. Like, sometimes I just feel like just, I don't know, is this all there is? And I hate that I feel that way because the world is so amazing. Like, my gosh, how could I possibly feel like that when we live on this planet with so many fascinating things, so many different kinds of people and places, and like just existing? What an amazing thing. I hate that I have days where it all kind of feels a little and that feeling never seems to lead me to a creative spark the way it did when I was young. And maybe some of it's middle age, maybe Maybe some of it isn't society, maybe it's just me. But I don't know. I don't know. I feel like I would rather blame society than myself. No, I do think though that it has done something to my brain to just have access to so much stimulation all the time, and I don't like it. So what do I do and what do you do if you feel this too? Obviously, there's a lot of talk about digital detoxes, putting away phones, getting flip phones instead, different things you can do to remove yourself from the stimulation, but it's hard to disengage with the world that we live in. So what I keep coming back to when I think about all this is that perhaps part of this is bringing myself back to simpler pleasures. Like, I spend a lot of time cooking, and I'm a little stubborn about it. Like, a part of me thinks, you spend too much time cooking. What a waste of your life. But then I wonder, is it really because I think that the time that I spend cooking, and I'm kind of bored while I'm cooking sometimes. Like, sometimes I'll put on a video or music in the background, but sometimes I'm just chopping vegetables in silence, just letting my brain wander, and I'm kind of bored. At the same time, I'm creating something. It feels like this very primal pleasure to be cooking and to be chopping vegetables and like making something from scratch. So I'm experiencing all this kind of like pleasures of cooking, the smells of it and such while I'm making it. And then I also just have this blank mind. And I think part of the reason I'm so protective of the time that I spend cooking, and like when people tell me, oh, you could just get like convenience food and not spend time cooking. And I realize a lot of people don't have time to cook. Like, they just don't. And that's fine. I'm not judging you for it. But I think the time I spend cooking is important because I'm so mentally unstimulated while I'm doing it that it's kind of a little break in my day. Like, there's a lot of talk about like filling the well when it comes to creativity, how you need to make sure that you take time to like read books or even watch TV or movies or listen to music that inspires you, just to take in art that inspires your writing or other creative works. You can't just create without taking things in. But I think that it's also perhaps important to protect the silence and the nothing parts of the day. Maybe you stand in line and you don't have your phone, or you're waiting on your takeout order and you leave your phone in the car if you don't have time to chop vegetables for an hour, just to preserve a certain amount of time in your day where there's nothing going on. And that can also seem a little scary, especially if you're not used to it. I know some people feel like they don't want to be left alone with their thoughts in silence. And especially if your mind is going to a fearful place a lot, and mine does sometimes when I'm chopping vegetables, I'm just like worrying over problems. So then I wonder, is that a good idea? Should I be doing this? But I think that the solution to it is not to cut that time out of my day, but to try to work on how to shift my thoughts so that they don't go to dark places, whether it's perhaps acknowledging that I need to spend even less time on social media, or that I need to just work on like, okay, you're having a dark thought, maybe you need to think about your book instead, or think about something creative, but in that kind of back burnery kind of way. Like, especially when I'm falling asleep, if I have bad thoughts, I really try to shift it toward working out like a scene in my book or something instead. If I'm having a lot of like kind of doom loopy thoughts, I really try to take those thoughts and just shift out of them and think about my writing projects, like what my characters might do in the next scene or something like that. Or even just writing in my head, like little side dialogues, and just try to learn to like go from the dark thought to the positive or like more creative thought. And I think that even though sometimes this can be hard, I feel like it's important for me to maintain all of this, the quiet time and the time where I have to keep learning to shift my thoughts from the bad and also the really mundane into creative and interesting and positive places. None of this is exactly what I would call easy, but yeah, these are just some thoughts I've been having, so I wanted to talk about it, see what you guys think about all of this too. Like, do you know what I mean about this stuff? Does anybody else feel like you used to be more like just bored and now you feel more of this apathetic feeling? Or is that just me? I don't know. I would love to know all of your thoughts on boredom and giving your brain time to think in silence and just, I don't know, apathy with life. What do you do about it? If you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove and I'm a fantasy author. And on this channel, I talk about the creative life in general and the writing life in particular, with a focus on like the emotional side of having a creative life. Once again, I would like to thank Brilliant for sponsoring this video. Make sure to check them out to improve your thinking and problem-solving skills with the link in the description or my QR code on screen. Thank you so much, Brilliant. If you like more from me, I have a Patreon and a Substack, as well as YouTube memberships, and joining those gets you 2 bonus videos a month, as well as access to my Discord channel where we talk about the creative life and writing and nerdy stuff all day long. If you'd like to read any of my books, my Hidden Lands books are like my fantasy novels that are the most true to my heart. But my free book of the month for October is Tasting Gretel, which is one of my very steamy fairy tale retellings. It's a retelling of Hansel and Gretel, but instead of an old witch, we have a mysterious fairy mage who makes tantalizing pastries. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and if you'd like to catch my lives, I post on every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, as well as sometimes on Wednesday evenings. And I'll see you next time. Bye! And there's Coco. There's Coco. You look so silly. Yeah, you look so silly. You got a big old fuzz. Yeah, there you are.